They said the camera wasn't working. No footage, no witnesses, no evidence. Just another case that would disappear quietly. But they were wrong, because somewhere inside that building, one camera never shut off. A hidden system, a forgotten backup. And when someone finally accessed it, they didn't find an empty hallway. They found something moving, something no one could explain. And the worst part? It wasn't supposed to be there. The building was never supposed to be dangerous. It wasn't abandoned, it wasn't hidden, and it definitely wasn't the kind of place people avoided. In fact, during the day, it looked completely normal. Busy even. Offices filled with employees, security guards rotating shifts, cameras placed at every entrance and corridor, all feeding into a central system that was supposed to see everything. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Just another building in a city that never really paid attention to what happened behind closed doors. But that night, something changed. It started with something small, almost insignificant. A routine maintenance alert in the system logs. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the CCTV network flagged a temporary shutdown. Not unusual. Systems go offline all the time for updates, resets, minor errors. The night guard barely looked at it. He had seen the same notification dozens of times before. Cameras would go dark for a few minutes, then come back. That was a pattern. That was normal. But this time they didn't come back. At least, not in the way anyone expected. Because at 2:14 a.m., every visible camera feed went completely black. Not static, not distortion. Just nothing. A clean, silent blackout across the entire system. The monitors in security rooms showed blank screens, one after another, like the building itself had suddenly decided to stop being watched. The guard leaned forward slightly, confused now. This wasn't standard behavior. A full blackout wasn't part of any routine update. He checked the system panel, tried refreshing the feeds, restarting the interface, but nothing responded the way it should. The system showed active, but the cameras showed nothing. That's when the first mistake was made. He assumed it was a technical issue, something that could wait until morning, something someone else would handle. So instead of escalating it, instead of investigating further, he wrote it down in a log and leaned back in his chair, telling himself it would fix itself like it always did. And for a moment, everything was quiet again. Too quiet, because at 2:17 a.m., something entered the building. No alarms triggered. No doors forced open. No signs of entry at all. From the outside, nothing happened. The building remained sealed, untouched, undisturbed. But inside, something moved. Floor by floor, corridor by corridor, passing through spaces that should have been empty. Spaces that, according to the system, no one could see. And that's what made it worse. Because if no one could see it, no one could stop it. The first real sign that something was wrong didn't come until the next morning. Employees began arriving as usual, unaware of anything unusual. Conversations, footsteps, routine movements filling the building again like nothing had happened. But then, someone noticed. One office, door slightly open, light still on, and inside, something wasn't right. It wasn't obvious at first. No chaos, no broken furniture, just absence. Something that should have been there wasn't, and that absence spread. One office became two became three. Small inconsistencies appearing across the floor, like pieces of a puzzle no one understood yet. Files missing, objects moved, systems accessed at times no one could explain. It didn't look like a break-in. It looked precise, intentional, like someone had been inside for a reason. That's when security was called again. The same guard, the same system, the same unanswered question. What happened between 2:13 and 2:17 a.m.? He pulled up the footage. Or at least, he tried to. Every camera showed the same thing. Black screen. No recording. No playback. No trace of anything that had happened during that window. For minutes of complete nothing. And yet, something clearly happened. Because the evidence was there, just not on the system that was supposed to capture it. That's when the situation changed from routine to investigation. Management got involved. Then external investigators. than people who didn't care about explanations. They cared about answers, because something had entered a secured building without being seen and left behind signs that it had been there. That shouldn't have been possible. Not with a fully monitored system, not with controlled access, not with everything in place to prevent exactly this kind of situation, unless the system itself had failed in a way no one understood, or worse, in a way that wasn't accidental. The deeper they looked into it, the more uncomfortable the answers became, because the shutdown didn't behave like a malfunction. It behaved like something controlled, timed perfectly, cleanly executed. No glitches, no partial feeds, just a complete and precise blackout. And that raised a question no one wanted to ask. What if the cameras weren't just turned off, but disabled intentionally? But even that didn't explain everything, because disabling a system leaves traces, logs, errors, signatures, something. And yet, this left nothing, just silence. And silence, in situations like this, is never empty. It's hiding something. Days passed without answers. The footage remained blank. The system remained normal. The case began to slow, like all unresolved things eventually do. Because without proof, there's nothing to follow, nothing to build on, nothing to prove, and that's when it should have ended. But it didn't, because one person noticed something everyone else missed. A detail so small, it shouldn't have mattered. A backup system. Not part of the main CCTV network, not monitored regularly, not even listed in the active security overview. It was old, almost forgotten, installed years ago as a failsafe during a system upgrade and never removed. It didn't shut down with the main network. It didn't follow the same commands. It didn't respond to the same controls, which meant when the main cameras went dark, it didn't, and when they finally accessed it, everything changed. Because what they found wasn't empty. It wasn't black. It wasn't silent. It was recording. And what it captured should not have been possible. The room went completely silent when the backup system finally loaded. Not the kind of silence that comes from calm, but the kind that builds when something is about to go wrong. The monitor flickered once, twice, and then stabilized into a grainy black and white feed. It wasn't clean like the main system. This was older. Rough, slight distortion along the edges, faint static crawling across the image. But it was working, and more importantly, it had been recording the entire time. The technician hesitated before pressing play, not because he didn't want answers, but because something about the situation didn't feel right anymore, like they were about to see something they weren't meant to see. Still, he clicked. The timestamp appeared in the corner, 2:12:58 a.m. 2 seconds before the official shutdown. The hallway looked exactly as expected. Empty, quiet, motionless. Fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. Then the timestamp rolled forward. 2:13 a.m. That was when everything was supposed to go dark. On the main system. It did, but here it didn't. The feed continued. Uninterrupted. No blackout. No glitch. Just the same empty hallway, still and silent. For a few seconds, nothing happened, and for a brief moment, it almost felt disappointing, like maybe this was just another dead end, another false lead. But then something changed, not suddenly, not obviously, subtly, so subtle that if you weren't watching carefully, you'd miss it completely. One of the lights at the far end of the corridor flickered, just once, a quick, uneven pulse. The kind that could easily be dismissed as a minor electrical issue. But then it flickered again, longer this time. And when it came back on, something was different. The technician leaned closer to the screen. "Pause it," someone said. The video froze. They stared at the frame. At first, no one spoke, because no one was completely sure what they were seeing. And then someone pointed. There, at the very edge of the frame, near the far end of the hallway, something that wasn't there before was now. A shape, dark, slightly distorted, not clear enough to identify, but definitely there. The technician zoomed in. The image degraded slightly, pixels stretching, details blurring, but the shape remained. And it wasn't static. It was moving, slowly, almost unnaturally slow. Not walking, not running, just shifting forward. The room tightened. Breathing changed. Because now it wasn't just footage. It was something happening. Something unfolding in real time that should have been impossible. "Play it," the lead investigator said quietly. The video resumed. The shape continued moving, step by step, or something like steps. But the motion didn't match normal movement. It was too smooth, too controlled, like it wasn't bound by the same physical rhythm as a person. And then it stopped right in the center of the hallway, under the brightest light. For a moment, it just stood there, motionless. And that was when the distortion started. The screen glitched, not fully, just around the figure. Like the image itself couldn't stabilize properly. Lines bending, edges warping, as if the camera was struggling to process what it was seeing. "Is that interference?" someone asked. No one answered, because interference doesn't behave like that. It doesn't isolate one part of the image. It doesn't react. And this felt like a reaction. Then the figure moved again, but this time faster. Not a normal acceleration, not a gradual shift. One moment it was in the center of the hallway. The next, it was closer, much closer. The distance it covered didn't match the time it took. It didn't walk forward. It skipped, jumped, like frames were missing, but they weren't. The timestamp was continuous. No drops, no cuts, which meant whatever moved, moved like that. The technician instinctively pulled back from the screen. "That's not possible," he said under his breath. But the footage didn't stop. It kept going. The figure now stood just a few meters from the camera, still not fully clear, still partially obscured by distortion. But closer meant more detail. Enough to confirm one thing. It wasn't empty. It had form, a rough outline that resembled a human shape, but not perfectly. The proportions felt off, slightly elongated, slightly misaligned, like something trying to imitate a person, but not getting it right. And then it turned, directly toward the camera. That was the moment the entire room froze, because whatever doubt was left disappeared instantly. It knew the camera was there. It wasn't random movement. It wasn't unaware. It was aware, watching, and somehow responding. The image warped again, stronger this time, the distortion spreading outward from the figure like pressure against a lens. And then, for a single frame, just one, it became clearer. Not completely, not enough to fully understand, but enough to see something that shouldn't exist. A face, or something close to one, not detailed, not human, but structured enough to trigger recognition. Eyes, maybe, or spaces where eyes should be, a shape that suggested intention. And then it was gone, not faded, not walked away. Gone. The hallway was empty again, just like before. The lights steady, the air still, nothing moving, nothing left. The timestamp continued. 02:14, 02:15, 02:16. Nothing else appeared. No return, no trace. Just an empty corridor like nothing had ever happened. The technician paused the video. No one spoke, because there was nothing to say that made sense. Eventually, someone broke the silence. "Run it again." They did. Same result. Same movement. Same moment where it turned. Same frame where the image sharpened just enough to be wrong. Completely wrong. "Enhance that frame," the investigator ordered. The technician isolated it. Zoomed in. Adjusted contrast. Clean noise as much as possible. The image improved, but not in a comforting way. It didn't reveal clarity. It revealed structure. Enough to confirm what they feared. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a trick of light. This wasn't interference. Something had been there. Something the main system didn't capture because it couldn't, or because it wasn't allowed to. The room felt different now. Heavier, colder, because this wasn't just a break-in anymore. This wasn't just a system failure. This was something else entirely. Something that didn't follow rules. Something that moved through a secured building without triggering alarms, without appearing on primary cameras, without leaving clear physical evidence. Except for one thing. The backup system. The one thing no one thought to check. The one thing that wasn't supposed to matter. And now, it was the only thing that did. The investigator leaned back slowly, eyes still locked on the frozen frame. "This wasn't meant to be seen," he said quietly. No one argued, because deep down they all felt it. Whatever had been captured on that footage wasn't just hidden. It was never supposed to exist in the first place. And now that they had seen it, the real question wasn't what it was. The real question was, had it seen them too? No one left the room immediately after the footage ended. Not because they were told to stay, but because something inside them refused to move. The screen still held that final frozen frame, the one they kept replaying in their minds, even without pressing play again. That single moment where the figure turned, where it didn't just exist in the hallway, it acknowledged something, and that something felt uncomfortably close to awareness. The investigator was the first to shift, but even his movement was slower than usual, like he was recalibrating himself after seeing something that didn't fit into any logical category. "Loop it," he said quietly. The technician obeyed without speaking. The clip restarted. Again, same hallway, same flicker, same emergence, same movement that didn't match time. But this time, they weren't watching for what it was. They were watching for what it did, and more importantly, how it behaved. The third replay revealed something they hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just moving through the corridor randomly. It was following a path, precise, intentional, not wandering, not exploring, directed, as if it already knew where it was going. "Pause," the investigator said suddenly. The frame froze just before the figure reached the center of the hallway. He pointed toward the far wall. "Zoom there." The technician adjusted the image, isolating the background. It took a second, but then it became clear. A door, closed, unremarkable. The kind of door no one would look at twice. Except now it mattered, because that door led to a restricted room, access controlled. No one entered without clearance. And yet, something had moved directly toward it. The video resumed. The figure stopped exactly where they had seen before, under the light, facing forward. Then it turned toward the camera, and after that, it disappeared. But something about that sequence didn't feel complete anymore, because now they knew where it had been heading, which meant the question changed. It wasn't just what they saw in the hallway. It was what happened after. "Check the door logs," the investigator said. Another system was pulled up, access records, time-stamped entries. The technician scrolled to 2:13 a.m. Nothing. No access. No entry. No override. The door remained sealed according to every system in place. But that didn't match what they had just seen, because whatever that thing was, it didn't stop at doors. It didn't need to. The second layer of tension settled in slowly, because now this wasn't just about something appearing on camera. It was about something moving through secured spaces without interacting with the systems designed to stop it. "We need to check that room," someone said. No one disagreed, but no one moved immediately either, because the idea of going there, of stepping into a space that something unexplainable had entered, carried a weight no one wanted to acknowledge out loud. Still, procedure overrode hesitation. They made their way down the same hallway, the same one from the footage, but it felt different in person. Longer, colder. Every step echoed just a little too much. The lights above were steady now. No flickering. No signs of malfunction. Everything looked normal, and that was the problem, because normal didn't match what they had seen. When they reached the door, they stopped, just for a second, enough to exchange looks that said more than words could. Then the investigator stepped forward and unlocked it. The door opened slowly. No resistance. No sound beyond the hinge. Inside, nothing looked wrong. At least not at first glance. The room was intact. Equipment in place. No signs of forced entry. No damage. No chaos. Just stillness. Too much stillness. They stepped inside carefully, eyes scanning everything. And that's when the second anomaly appeared. A system console near the center of the room was active, not unusual on its own, but according to the logs, it hadn't been accessed all night. And yet, the screen was on. Not just on, running, processing something. The technician moved closer. checked the interface. His expression changed immediately. "This shouldn't be open," he said quietly. "What is it?" the investigator asked. The technician hesitated, then answered, "Internal archive access." The room shifted again, because internal archives weren't casually accessed. They were protected, restricted, logged at every level. And yet, here it was, open, active, unrecorded. "Check what was accessed," the investigator said. The technician navigated through the system. A list appeared. Files, records, data entries. And one by one, they began to understand. It wasn't random. It wasn't scattered. It was specific, targeted. Every file opened during that time window was connected, not by location, not by time, but by subject, people, employees, records of individuals who worked in the building, background files, security clearances, personal data. It had searched through them, selected them, accessed them without leaving a trace in the official logs, except for this one moment, this one open system. "Why these?" someone asked. No one had an answer, but the pattern was clear enough to create something worse than confusion. It created intention, because this wasn't a presence wandering through a building. This was something looking for something, or someone. The technician scrolled further, and then he stopped. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice lower now, tighter. The investigator stepped closer. "What?" The technician pointed at the screen. "It didn't just access files," he said. "It created one. Silence. Absolute, because that didn't make sense. Not at any level. Open it," the investigator said. The technician clicked. The file loaded instantly. No delay, no encryption barrier, just immediate access. And what appeared on the screen made everything worse. It wasn't a document, not in the traditional sense. It wasn't text. It wasn't data. It was an image, a still frame, grainy, distorted, but recognizable. The hallway, the same one from the footage, but the angle was wrong, different from the backup camera, lower, closer, as if it had been captured from inside the space, not from a wall, not from a system, from something present. And in that image they saw it again, the figure, but clearer this time, not fully defined, not fully human, but closer than before. And this time it wasn't facing away, it was facing forward, directly at the point where the image had been captured, directly at whoever or whatever had taken it. And at the bottom of the file, there was a timestamp, 2:17 a.m., 3 minutes after the main system went dark, and 1 minute after it disappeared from the hallway footage, which meant only one thing. It didn't leave. It went deeper. And whatever it was looking for, it found it. The investigator stared at the screen, his expression no longer just focused, but unsettled in a way he couldn't hide anymore. "This isn't surveillance," he said quietly. "This is something else." No one asked what he meant, because they already felt it. This wasn't just a recording anymore. This wasn't just evidence. This was interaction. Something had entered the building, accessed systems, selected information, and left behind proof that it had been there. Not by accident, not by error, but intentionally. And now, the question wasn't what it was doing that night. The question was, why did it choose them? And more importantly, was it finished? Or was that just the beginning? No one spoke for a long time after the image loaded. Not because they didn't have questions, but because every question led somewhere worse. The room no longer felt like a place of investigation. It felt like a place where something had already happened and they had arrived too late to stop it. The investigator didn't take his eyes off the screen. That image, the one that shouldn't exist, kept pulling his attention back, like it wasn't just something to observe, but something that demanded to be understood. "Run a system trace," he said finally. The technician hesitated for a fraction of a second. "On what?" he asked. "Everything," the investigator replied. That was when the atmosphere shifted again, because up until now, they had been reacting, watching footage, following clues, trying to piece together something that had already happened. But this was different. This was looking deeper. And sometimes looking deeper doesn't reveal answers. It reveals something watching back. The technician began the trace. Lines of code filled the screen, system paths opening one after another, logs unfolding in rapid succession. At first, everything looked normal. Standard operations, routine processes, nothing out of place. But then a pattern appeared, small at first, easy to miss. Repeated access points that didn't match user behavior. Commands that weren't triggered manually. Data queries that didn't align with any logged request. "Stop," the investigator said. The technician froze the screen. "Go back." They isolated the pattern, zoomed in, slowed it down, and that was when they saw it clearly. The system hadn't just been accessed. It had been used. Not like a tool, like an extension, as if whatever had entered the building didn't just move through physical space. It moved through the system itself. "That's not possible," the technician whispered. But it was already there, written in the logs. Commands executed without input. Files opened without credentials. Internal pathways triggered without authorization. And all of it happening in perfect sequence. Too perfect. Too clean. Like it wasn't random at all. Like it was learning. The investigator's expression hardened slightly. Not fear, but recognition. Because this wasn't chaos. This wasn't malfunction. This was structure. It understood the system, he said quietly. "No," the technician replied, his voice tighter now. "It didn't understand it," he paused, then corrected himself. "It adapted to it." That word landed differently. Adapted, because adaptation means change, improvement, progress. And if something could do that inside a secured system, then it wasn't just interacting with it. It was evolving through it. The room felt colder now, not physically, but mentally, because the situation had crossed another line. This wasn't just about something appearing on a camera. This wasn't just about unexplained movement. This was something that entered a controlled environment and learned how to move within it. The investigator stepped back slightly, his focus shifting from the screen to the room itself. "Shut the system down," he said. The technician didn't move. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Now," the investigator replied. The command was entered. The system began its shutdown sequence. Monitors flickered. Processes terminated. One by one, the screens went dark. And for a moment, everything stopped. Silence. Complete. Final. The kind of silence that feels like control has been restored. But it didn't last. Because one screen didn't turn off. Just one, at the far end of the console. Still active. Still running. The technician frowned. "That shouldn't," he started, but didn't finish. Because the screen changed. On its own. No input. No command. Just movement. The interface shifted into something unfamiliar. Not part of the system they recognized. Not part of any standard program. Just a blank field with a single line appearing slowly across it. Text. Not code. Not data. Words. They appeared one letter at a time. Deliberate. Controlled. Like something was writing instead of executing. No one moved. No one spoke. Because they were no longer observing a system. They were watching something use it. The line completed. And the room felt like it dropped into something deeper than fear. "You watched." That was all it said. Nothing else. No explanation. No context. Just that. Simple. Direct. And impossible to ignore. The technician's hands hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to respond or disconnect everything completely. The investigator didn't look away. Couldn't, because this changed everything. "It knows," someone said quietly. But the investigator shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "It doesn't just know." He paused, then finished. "It's responding." That realization settled in slowly, but once it did, it didn't leave, because responding means awareness, and awareness changes the nature of everything. This wasn't a recording anymore. This wasn't a trace left behind. This was interaction. Something had entered the building, used the system, accessed information, and now it was acknowledging them. The screen flickered again. The text disappeared, replaced by something else. The same hallway image, but this time different, updated. The angle shifted slightly. The position changed, and the figure was closer, not in the past. Now, because the timestamp in the corner wasn't from that night. It was current, live, the hallway outside the room. Someone turned toward the door instinctively. No one moved toward it, because the realization hit all at once. Whatever had been there that night, whatever moved through the system, whatever accessed their data, it hadn't left. It had stayed. Or worse, it had returned. The screen showed movement. Subtle, but real, at the edge of the frame. The same distortion. The same unnatural shift. And then, just like before, it stepped into the center of the hallway, under the light, clearer than it had ever been. Not fully visible, not completely defined, but enough to confirm the one thing they were no longer able to deny. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a recording error. It wasn't something that had passed through once and disappeared. It was still here. And now, it wasn't just being watched. It was watching back. The investigator took a slow breath, his voice steady but lower than before. "We didn't find the footage," he said quietly. "The footage found us." And in that moment, every system in the room shut off completely. Lights flickered. Screens died. The building dropped into darkness for just a second too long. And when the emergency lights finally came back on, the hallway camera feed was gone. But the feeling remained. Heavy, unavoidable, certain. This wasn't over. It had never been over. Because whatever had been captured on that hidden camera wasn't just recorded. It had learned. And now it was still watching. When the lights came back, nothing felt restored. The room looked the same desks, the same dead screens, the same door leading out into hallway. But whatever sense of control they thought they had was gone completely, because control depends on understanding. And there was nothing about this that made sense anymore. For a few seconds, no one moved. The emergency lights cast a dull, uneven glow across the walls, stretching shadows in ways that felt wrong, like the space itself had shifted slightly out of place. The investigator was the first to react, but even his movements were slower now, more deliberate, like every step carried weight. "Power it back up," he said quietly. The technician didn't argue. He moved to the console, hands steady but tighter than before, and began restarting the system. One by one, the monitors flickered back to life, black screens turning into loading sequences, system diagnostics running automatically, everything appearing normal again. Too normal, because moments ago, that same system had written something back to them, had shown them something live, had proven, without any doubt left to question, that whatever they were dealing with wasn't just recorded footage. It was present, and now it was gone. Or at least it looked gone. The hallway feed came back first. Clean, stable, empty, no distortion, no flicker, just a quiet corridor under steady lights. Exactly the way it should be. The technician leaned forward, scanning for any anomaly, any sign that something remained. But there was nothing. No movement, no trace, no evidence of what they had just seen. "It's gone," someone said under their breath. But the investigator didn't respond, because something about that conclusion felt wrong. Not uncertain, wrong. Gone implies absence. And absence didn't match what they had experienced. What they had experienced felt like presence, controlled, intentional, watching, waiting. "Run internal logs again," he said. The technician complied, pulling up the same system traces they had reviewed earlier. But this time the pattern was gone. Completely. Clean logs. No irregular commands. No unauthorized access. No anomalies. It was as if the system had reset itself, not just functionally, but historically, like whatever had used it had removed its own footprint. The technician stared at the screen longer than necessary. "There's nothing here," he said. The investigator nodded slowly. "That's the problem," he replied, "because systems don't clean themselves that perfectly, not without leaving something behind. A trace, a fragment, a misalignment. But this was exact, controlled, final, and that meant one thing. It didn't just move through the system. It understood it well enough to erase itself from it. The room felt smaller now, not physically but mentally, because every layer they uncovered didn't bring clarity. It removed it, until there was nothing left to hold on to except one undeniable truth. This wasn't something that had passed through. This was something that had chosen to be here. The investigator turned toward the door again. The hallway outside looked exactly as it had moments before. Empty, quiet, still. But now it felt like something else entirely. Not a space, not a corridor, but a boundary. And boundaries exist for a reason. He stepped closer. Not quickly, not cautiously, just deliberately. Because at this point, hesitation didn't change anything. He reached the door and paused for a fraction of a second, just long enough to feel it. That same pressure, that same awareness. Then he opened it. The hallway was empty, completely. No movement, no distortion, no flickering lights. Just a silent stretch of space under steady illumination. But something about it felt different. Not visibly, not in a way he could point to, but in a way that settled somewhere deeper than sight. He stepped out. The others didn't follow immediately, but they didn't stop him either, because at this point, they all understood something had already crossed into a place they couldn't control. He walked slowly down the corridor, each step echoing slightly more than it should. The same path from the footage, the same position where it had stopped, where it had turned, where it had looked directly at the camera. He stopped there, right under the light, and for a moment nothing happened. Just silence, just stillness. And then, very faint, almost imperceptible at first, the light above him flickered once. He didn't move, didn't look up, just waited, because now he knew. It didn't appear randomly. It didn't move without reason. It chose its moments. The flicker came again, slightly longer, and when the light stabilized, the temperature in the hallway dropped just enough to be felt. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but noticeably. The kind of change your body registers before your mind does. The investigator exhaled slowly, not in fear, not in panic, but in recognition, because now it was clear this wasn't over. It hadn't ended when the footage stopped. It hadn't ended when the system shut down. It hadn't ended when the screen went dark, because it was never about the footage. The footage was just the beginning, a way in, a way to be seen, a way to make contact. He turned slightly, not fully, just enough to shift his perspective. And that's when he felt it, not saw it, not heard it, felt it. Presence. Close. Too close. Like something standing just outside the edge of perception. And in that moment, the realization settled completely. It didn't leave the building. It didn't escape. It didn't disappear into nothing. It stayed. Because it wanted to. Because it had chosen this place. These systems. These people. The investigator didn't speak. Didn't react. Because reaction implies surprise. And this wasn't surprising anymore. It was expected. The final piece of something that had been building since the moment the cameras went dark. Somewhere behind him, one of the monitors inside the room flickered back to life. No one touched it. No one triggered it. But it turned on anyway. And on that screen, a single line appeared again. The same slow, deliberate text forming letter by letter. Not rushed, not random. Intentional. Watching. Choosing. The line completed. You were selected. That was it. No explanation. No follow-up. Just confirmation. Because this was never about what they saw. It was about what saw them. And now, whatever wasn't hiding anymore. It wasn't passing through. It wasn't leaving. It was staying. And the building, every camera, every system, every quiet hallway, was no longer a place of observation. It was part of something else. Something that didn't just record reality. Something that changed it. And the worst part wasn't that it existed. The worst part was that it chose them.